Hi everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Yep, we got some snow. It's four-wheel drive season, and guess what we have to diagnose this morning? A 2002 Toyota 4Runner SR5 four-wheel drive. This thing looks pretty nice. It's got the, I guess, wheels from a later gen 4Runner. 3400 V6, the legendary 5FZ FE or 5VZ FE, and 175,000 miles on this thing. What's the customer complaint? Customer complaint is long crank time after a hot soak. This is like deja vu. We just did that Camry with the leaky injector, and well, we'll see. What's the history of the vehicle? Let's take a look at what the customer wrote and start from scratch, see where this goes. Alright, let's read the customer email here. He says he's the 7th owner of this 4Runner. He bought it 3 years ago for his son. He's done a lot of maintenance on it. He's a Toyota enthusiast. He loves keeping his Toyotas in great condition. So fuel related stuff, let's see. It has always thrown a code randomly for evap leak. Interesting. Fuel filter was one of the first things replaced. The rough starts have been ongoing for about a year. First fix is to replace the fuel regulator. OEM parts always didn't fix it. Then replaced the aftermarket mass airflow sensor with OEM sensor. Then replaced both AF sensors with OEM. Okay. Problem seemed somewhat better, but think we just did not nail down the timing of the rough start, as my son would drive to school daily. Vehicle usually had cold starts back and forth, so no problem starting. Then we realized the warm engine starting issue. I had the fuel injectors replaced. Oh, this sounds familiar. Thinking it had to be the issue, leaky fuel injector. Wrong again, but it sure does run better. Okay. Then recently we had new plugs and wires replaced. Old plugs were correct. Dual electrode, new OEM replacements. So you have to give it a little gas to get it to start up, and then it smooths out. Acts like a flooded vehicle in the old carburetor days. Okay. I've done a ton of online research with this issue at a loss. It has been throwing a lean code the last few months, and fuel trims will reflect that, but they settle down after you give it gas and drive. Gas mileage is normal for oversized tires, and it drives great. I will put in a recent part that I ordered thinking maybe the elusive fix, the coolant temperature sensor, but I checked the temps on my code reader and they seem normal, 192 degrees. Okay, so what do we have? I asked the owner specifically, do you have your original fuel injectors? And yes, he brought them, so that's nice. We have the original fuel injectors just in case that's the problem. Some O-rings. That's the original set of injectors. Also, this is a brand new coolant temperature sensor just in case we need that. So we have some parts on hand. Yeah, so let's start from scratch. Go right into OBD2 data, just basic data. I want to see if any codes are stored, if all the monitors are complete off the bat. We'll check the fluids under the hood, then start it up and look at some live data. Okay, so in OBD2, here are the readiness monitors, and evap system is not complete. So it probably hasn't set that evap code yet, so we can't really diagnose what it hasn't run. Let's look at trouble code, see if there's anything pending. Check engine light is not on at the moment. Gathering codes. No codes present. Okay, so we have no clues at the moment. Go right into current data. And let's check the fluids real quick. Close the hood. Alright, so let's check the oil level. Yep, we're halfway between the marks. That's fine. And then coolant. Coolant's actually all the way to the top here. the full mark is down here halfway up the bottle. So I don't know why this thing is overfilled in the reservoir. Let's just make sure it has coolant here. Now the radiator is empty. What the heck? Well, that's a problem. So let's not touch that just yet. There's your problem. It spit the coolant into the reservoir, but there's the hose that's supposed to be coming from here to the bottom of the reservoir is missing. That's why it's not drawing coolant back from the reservoir into the radiator. That's key. So that was a 30-second diagnosis there why we're missing coolant in the radiator and this thing's overflowing. So again, it's okay for now. We'll take care of that. I want to reproduce this long crank time first. Alright, here's the live data. Just 10 data PIDs. Engine coolant temp is 33. That's normal. Long-term fuel trim bank 1, 36%. Holy crap. That's interesting. That's stored in memory. Let's fire it up and see what these numbers do. Okay, so pretty slow to update. You know, it's 2002. It's not a canned vehicle. That's why I'm using the Verus, because on pre-canned stuff, you can't beat it. Look at that long-term trim, 24. Equivalence ratio, it is running rich at the moment. That's our rich lean data PID. One is stoichiometric, but it's warming up. Let's let it warm up a bit. See that engine coolant temperature rise. And once it goes into closed loop, we'll see what the fuel trims do. Alright, so we just went to closed loop. Look at our long term, 36% positive, and short term is minus 20. And we're right at stoichiometric, that's fine. Our sensor 2 is awake. I'm just going to hold the RPMs up a little bit. That's a crazy long-term trim. Why is short-term minus 17? Wow. Okay, airflow rate's 8.6 grams per second. It should drop down to around 4 at a hot idle. So let's let it warm up, see what happens. Alright, so almost fully warmed up. 30 on the long term, short term is stable. Stoichiometric. So this thing has, on the base fuel map, a lean condition, and it doesn't look like it has to do anything with the mass airflow sensor. So in neutral, 650 RPM, we're at 4.4, and if the long term is at 30%, that means this thing's not getting enough fuel. So that could be either low fuel pressure, or those aftermarket injectors aren't flowing as much as the old ones. Okay, but let's take it for a rip here on the paved road. Seems to accelerate fine. Still 25% on the long term. We're stoichiometric. Now it's in fuel cut. So let's do more of a wide open throttle and see what the air fuel ratio does and what the fuel trim does. So we don't need that. We're just going to look at long term fuel trim and the equivalence ratio. So I'm gonna punch it. So it actually went lean there. The data is pretty slow. It seems like it doesn't have enough fuel. should be a little faster. Try that again. Not terrible. Alright. So I noticed during heavy acceleration the downstream oxygen sensor was dropping low. That kind of fits this lean condition theme. So if we look at the throttle position, right there during those high throttle events, you can see the oxygen sensor is dropping low. And I'm going to just pump the gas. That should force both upstream and downstream rich. You can see the downstream is completely flatline lean. Alright, let's see, let's shut it off. Key back on. See how it starts right after a shutdown. Okay, seems to be normal. Now I'm going to shut it down, let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll see if we have the long crank time. This one, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a leaky injector or a rich condition on startup. It's probably going to be a lean condition, not enough fuel. Now once we get back to the shop, we can pop off the air hose and after 15-20 minutes take a smell inside the air intake, make sure that it's not like filled with raw gas fumes. But this one's going to be different than the Camry, even though the symptoms are very similar. Alright, so after 5 minutes it started right up, no problems. It has no codes present. I can't believe it hasn't set a lean code yet. But maybe, you know, these older cars are more reluctant to set codes. So I got into the Toyota OEM menu. Here we can actually see injector pulse width, and that's a key parameter for injector flow. So right now at a hot idle, our long-term fuel trim is 36%. Pretty crazy. It's still in control. Mass airflow is reading 4.0 grams per second. That's fine. I'm fine with that. Injector pulse width is 3.7. So I'm going to save this data, and if we end up swapping to the old injectors, this 3.7 is key. That's like your injector flow. You know, for a 3.7 millisecond injector pulse width, we have 36% long-term fuel trim. So to take a picture of this screen, that's going to be our reference with this set of reman injectors at a hot idle. Alright, 4Runners in the shop. What are the next steps? So it's been about 10 minutes since I parked it. I'm going to let it sit for another 10 before we try to crank it again. Meanwhile, I want to take off the coolant reservoir, see if we can, if the pipe is in there. I want to get the cooling system, you know, spot on. And then I want to pop off this air pipe, open the throttle body, and just smell for fumes. I don't expect that this will be an over-fueling or, you know, intake filling with fumes problem, but I just want to check. Easy check to do. Then I want to plumb in a fuel pressure gauge. You know, after the long crank, we'll see what it does. And then I think right here is the fuel feed hose. Hopefully I have the right adapter for that. Before going after injectors, I want to make sure this fuel pressure is holding. You know, on a hot crank, you want to make sure the fuel pressure is holding so the rail doesn't boil the fuel off. So there could be separate issues here. You know, lean condition, yes. And then the long crank time, there could be a separate issue, or it could be tied together because on a, you know, a warm start, it still starts an open loop. And if it goes to zero fuel trim, and this thing is happy at 35% additional fuel, it just might be starved for fuel on that warm start. Now in a cold start, it starts okay because, you know, the mixture is enriching. It's like the choke, and that's enough to get it started. So that might be related to this lean condition. Ha! Drained the coolant tank. Sure enough, there's our overflow pipe just hanging out in there. So we extract that, and we'll attach it back to this nipple where it belongs. So here's the hose, and I really don't believe this is the right hose because it's not even close to staying on the nipple, and it's all like really mushy and gooey and covered in this nasty sticky stuff. So someone might have replaced it with the wrong hose. It needs to be a coolant rated hose, not, you know, whatever, like a vacuum line or something. But it's really soft and mushy, so let's find a better replacement. Alright, so I got a more solid hose. Actually, this one's kind of squishy too. Maybe that's OEM, I don't know, but it fell off. So we're going to install this, fill up the radiator, and at least that'll be fixed. Alright, let's take a quick whiff at the throttle body. Absolutely no raw gasoline fumes, so not suspecting a leaking injector at all. So let's try to fire it up. It's a long crank time. We're going right after fuel pressure. If that checks out, suspecting wrong aftermarket injectors, the wrong flow. Alright, here we go. So it's been about 30 minutes. Let's crank it over. And I'm watching the injector pulse width and the mass airflow sensor. Okay, so it started up, but it's kind of reluctant. Open loop. Let's try that again. Better. Alright, let's disconnect this fuel pressure feed line. And there's no, yeah, it is squirting out. Okay, there's some fuel pressure in there. Let me get a cup or a tray or something. Alright, let's fire this thing up. I already primed it once. Okay, about 30 psi. 32. Let's rev it up. It drops to 25 on a snap throttle, and the engine doesn't rev as fast as it should. Let's look up the spec here. I don't like this fuel pressure at all. And let's shut the engine off. Oh, that is not good at all. Look at that, 20. It's dropping like a rock. No wonder this thing starts hard when it's warm. That's our problem right there? Absolutely. We're very close. So we're down to fuel pump or fuel pressure regulator. Now, how can we check that valve? We can use that to our advantage. If the fuel injectors aren't leaking, but the return line is via the fuel pressure regulator, we can easily check that. Let's get it back up to 30. There we go. Yeah, it should have more of a flare up. So shut it off and quickly run over here, close that valve, and see if the pressure keeps dropping. So shut this. Still dropping like a rock. What does that tell you? Oh, we got a leak. That's a problem. Alright, got the leak fixed. Gotta eliminate that variable. So 32 psi. Let's snap the throttle, see what happens. Fuel pressure should go up on the snap throttle, not down. Yeah, I do want to take it on a test drive with the fuel pressure gauge here, but let's look at the specs. Alright, so at least we're holding at 32 with the engine off. So that bleed down was a leak on my fitting. So that should be okay. We'll give about 10-15 minutes, see how well it holds, and then see how well it starts up. Okay, so fuel pressure spec is 38 to 44 psi. Like I thought, it should be closer to 40. We're closer to 30, and on a rev it drops even lower. So we're dealing with a low fuel pressure situation. See, if the pressure is high, replace the fuel pressure regulator. That's easy. That was already done. If the pressure is low, check the fuel hoses, fuel hose connections, fuel pump, fuel filter, fuel pressure regulator, and VSV for the fuel pressure control. Interesting. VSV for fuel pressure control. So that's probably for the hot start. You should bump up the fuel pressure. We're definitely too low. So we could pinch off the return line. That's not hard to do, and see if the fuel pressure, if the pump can build appropriate pressure, if it's bleeding off through the regulator or not, and then go from there. Alright, so pressure's holding steady. It's been about 10 minutes. We're still at 31, so there's no bleed down problem. So we either have low fuel volume, coming from the pump, it can't keep up with the engine load, or poor fuel pressure regulation. Now, this truck runs pretty well under wide open throttle. It's just 30% lean all the time. Could a fuel flow problem from the pump affect idle as well as full throttle? I don't think so. I think this fuel pump is fine, but the fuel pressure regulator is not fine. Very easy check. All you need is some little vice grips. I put some shrink wrap on them so it wouldn't damage any hoses. And we're just going to pinch off the return line, which is right next to the feed line. Right here. Let me get those on there. And then we'll take a look at our fuel pressure. If it's up to whatever, 55 under throttle, we're dealing with a faulty OEM fuel pressure regulator. Alright, so fuel return line is pinched off. Let's see if the pump what the maximum pressure is from this pump. $33. Yeah, I don't like that. It doesn't drop as much. let's take it on a test drive and bring the vice grips along. Alright, we've got our fuel pressure gauge right here. Let's give it the beans. See what it does under heavy load. Man, this traction control system is, you can't have any fun in this truck. 25, 24, 23, 22. Here's your problem, man. Man, this thing's running lean. No wonder the fuel trims are at 35%. Yep, we're done. So we could try that same run with the return line pinched off, but this pump can't even build enough pressure to overcome the fuel pressure regulator. Even at idle, it's at 32. It should be at 38, like the spec said. So that regulator isn't doing anything. I mean, it's just closed. So when we pinch the line off, it won't change the reading at all. So problem with the pump. We replaced the fuel filter. We should check for, I mean, it's not going to be a kinked hose because that would only affect fuel flow, under load. And it still drives okay, so the volume is there, but the pressure just drops and drops and drops like a clogged screen, a pickup screen or something, like in the Audi in the Christmas special. Very similar. I'm surprised this thing actually drives decent with fuel pressure dropping to 25 under load. That's pretty crazy. But the computer is compensating for it, so let's pinch off that return line, do one more run, and then we'll be 100% sure we're going towards the pump. So return line pinched off, not a bit of difference. We're still at 32. Let's give it the acceleration. Same thing, as expected. Wow, 23. Looks like a weak fuel pump. So, if you pinch out the return hose on a returnless system, it doesn't matter if you have kinks in the feed line, that pressure should go up to the maximum pump pressure spec. And, well, it doesn't. It doesn't go above 33 or whatever. Then under load, it drops even further. So, something's up with the pump itself. I don't know if, I mean, a new unit would fix it. Could there be a line that's disconnected or leaking back into the tank? I don't know exactly how this system is set up. We have to go into the fuel tank. That's the next step. Oh, well, unfortunately, step one into removing this fuel pump is remove fuel tank. So I thought it was going to be easy with a nice access panel like most Toyotas, but nope, not in this truck. What we can do before we quote the customer on this fuel pump is measure the current through the fuel pump. So it's right there, and the load side is the circuit opening relay. So I just want to feed power to here with an amp clamp and see how much current this fuel pump is drawing and what the maximum output is. So that's going to be fuel pump relay, so circuit opening relay right there and under the dash. So we can get there, plug in a jumper, feed that power, and see what the current is. Alright, so last check here, located the circuit opening relay or the fuel pump relay. I have the amp clamp around the blue and orange wire. It's zeroed out, so we're going to see how much current the fuel pump draws. And I also want to measure the voltage. I want to make sure it has 12 volts on that feed wire, just to rule that out. And we have our fuel pressure gauge. It's still at 30 psi. So I'm going to command the fuel pump on with the scanner. And let's see, let's light that up. Okay, continue. Okay, so when I hit on, fuel pump is on, 30 psi. Seriously, 1 amp? That's weak sauce. What about the voltage on there? Are we getting 12 volts? Definitely getting 12 volts. Interesting. Half an amp? That's the weakest fuel pump ever.